Well, good morning and welcome to another edition of Morningstar University Online Quarantine Edition. I hope you've been enjoying these classes. My name is Nathan Plowman. I'm the Director of Morningstar Universities, and it's great to be with you again today. To all our students out there, hope you're doing well. And to everyone else who's watching from around the world, we welcome you here. We enjoy your comments and your presence, and we just hope that this has been really edifying for you. This will be almost our last week. I think next week will be our last week of online classes for the year. After that, we do hope to provide some content for you, but we still haven't figured that out yet. But if you've been interested in this and something that's been really good for you and you've really enjoyed it, then let us know what you've enjoyed. And if you have any ideas about any other content you might want us to show or any other teachings you may want us to present to you guys, then feel free to make those comments as well throughout these classes. We'd love to continue doing this for those who are still at home. I know the quarantine is lifting in some areas as people go back to work, so there won't be the same demand for the online content as before, but again, just let us know if there's anything you want us to teach or to do more training on. We're happy to kind of continue on with these classes. Also, don't forget, Morningstar University is open for applications right now. If this content has been interesting to you, if you have a desire to learn more about leadership and your calling and your destiny, then go ahead and check out our website at morningstaruniversity.com and look around there and just see what's going on and apply for the school. Right now, application fees have been waived for the next 2 months, so it's free to apply to the school, and we'd love to see you and connect with you. And if you have any questions about the school or about our training or about our courses, then go ahead and email us and contact us through the website, and we'll be happy to talk to you personally about the school. This is a great school. It's been developed through many years, and many great leaders have come through here, and so we recommend it to anybody right now, especially in today's world. We need good leaders. One of the things that, before I get into our topic today, one of the things that came up a little bit last Friday when Dave Valier and myself did a whole kind of like in-depth look at Morningstar University was the idea of how do you raise up leaders? What is the process involved in that? And, you know, if you figure that out, you can write a book and probably sell 1 million copies. But I want to share a little bit about what I've learned over the years about what raising up leaders kind of looks like. Because not everyone who comes to our school will become the next Steve Jobs or the next Reinhard Bonnke or whatever it is, whatever field they go into. Just because you go to a leadership school or you read a leadership book doesn't make you a great leader. So what does leadership school really do for you? And the best comparison I can kind of share with you is leadership school is kind of like going to art school. When you go to art school, you're being taught a lot about the techniques, the mediums, the tools, the history of art, different types of art, and all those kind of things. You're not really taught to be a great artist. You're given the tools to allow you to go on and become a great artist. They don't teach you to paint a masterpiece in art school. They teach you all the techniques to allow you to paint your own masterpiece. And for me, that's kind of a good example of what a leadership school really is. We're giving you all the tools and all the knowledge and the history and the context of what it means to be a great leader, but it's really up to each student to go out and to create their own masterpiece of leadership. And again, we're not a ministry school. We're not putting people just into ministry. We are not ordaining our students as they graduate from our school, although some will become ordained through us. We are a leadership school, which our teaching and our training allows you to be an effective, sustainable leader in any area you go into. Some people are called into the business world. In fact, a lot of our students are called into the business world. And how do you become a good biblical leader in the business world? Some people are called to government. We need godly character in government right now. Some people are called to education. Some people are called into entertainment. Whatever you're called into, our training here is geared towards giving you the tools and the experience to help you be successful in that area. Because a lot of leadership skills, they kind of, I guess you'd say, they cover a lot of different areas. They translate through different mountains. Talking about the 7 mountain mandate kind of idea. So anyway, that's kind of what we need. Think of a leadership school. Think of it as a training ground where you can learn the skills you need to be successful in leadership. But it's up to you to go and therefore leave the school and create your own masterpiece. Now again, our responsibility in that process is to give you all of our resources and experience to help you become what you're called to be, to help you find your path. We're not telling you what your path is. We're not going to, dictate to you where you go from here. We just want to help over the year or 2 years or however long you're here with us. We're trying to help you to find and discover where your passions are, to discover what God has called you to be, based on things that God has shown you since you were a child, based on things that God has shown you currently, and your passions and your desires, and put that into a path that you can walk out from here. So that's basically the school. And again, go to our website. You can enroll in the school right now. You can apply, and we'll get back to you very quickly right now. We really enjoy talking to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to just call us and communicate with us through the website. Okay, so I hope all the students are on right now. If you're on as a student, please connect and just say hi. I'm watching the Facebook feed right now, so make sure we're doing a little check-in on our students. So today, what I want to talk about is kind of along the lines of one of my passions. My background is science, and one of my passions has always been to look at modern day science and scientific understanding and connect that to what the Bible's been saying for a couple of thousand years now. And, there's kind of a saying that if the Bible doesn't correlate to science, then just wait. Eventually science will catch up to what the Bible's been saying. And, a good example of that would be, the Big Bang. For thousands of years, science had dictated that the universe never had a beginning. It was always as it was. And even Einstein believed that. All great scientists believe that. There was never a beginning to the universe. And therefore, the Bible was absolutely fundamentally wrong from the very first verse. Because the very first verse says, in the beginning, God created. Well, if the universe had no beginning, then the Bible is incorrect. It wasn't until mid-20th century, around 1940s, that they suddenly discovered, the universe had a beginning. And that's where the Big Bang Theory came from. And that really shook the scientific world. It was like a complete paradigm shift, what they've been used to. It was fundamentally different to what they'd understood. And it was very hard for a lot of scientists to accept that, the universe having a beginning. In fact, even in Russia, scientists were forbidden to research the idea because the idea of a beginning to the universe was against communist ideals. Because if the universe had a beginning, then it might have had a creator. And if the universe had a creator, then the Bible is no longer relevant. And so this idea that the Big Bang was kind of like a big, huge victory for the scriptures. It was like, yes, finally, the science has caught up to what the Bible's been saying for thousands of years. And if you look into the whole scientific time around that discovery and around that kind of understanding revealing itself, you'll see a lot of scientists were really conflicted with that idea. It was really challenging to science, and it was a huge victory for the Bible. But again, if the science doesn't match up with the Bible, just wait around, and eventually the science will catch up. And I think the same thing occurs in leadership and in psychology. A lot of things we're learning about in today's world, a lot of the latest research on mental health and all these other things is showing that the Bible's been saying these things for a long time. The new theories of gratitude and being thankful, the Bible's been saying that for a long time. And so one of my passions at teaching at Morningstar is to kind of expand on, let's look at some the latest research going on in the world today. These companies are spending millions and millions of dollars to research leadership, to research teams, to research what makes an effective team, to research what makes an effective leader. Because if you hire the wrong CEO for a major company, that can cost you hundreds of millions of dollars. So they want to really make sure they understand the process of hiring and also vetting these leaders. And this research is illuminating a lot of things that the Bible's been saying for a long time about effective leadership and about how to invite the grace of God into your life. So today I want to talk about one of these ideas. And I know Tom has talked about this a little bit in the past in some of his classes. And we mentioned this a lot in MSU, just as a good reference point to start from. But before I get into that, I want to make this statement. And this statement is on the screen right about now. And this is one thing I say a lot in school, and it's like, as the leader, it's not about you, but as the leader, it's all about you. And I'm going to kind of delve into this statement throughout the next couple of hours and just kind of unpack that a little bit, what that really means. But I want you to think about that for a second. As the leader, it's not about you, but as the leader, it's all about you. So let me just throw that out to you guys right now, and then we'll go back to this idea of good to great leadership. Take the PowerPoint off now if you like. So a couple of years ago, Jim Collins wrote a book, and in that book, the book was named Good to Great. And what Jim Collins did was spend a lot of time researching companies. He researched over 1,400 companies in the Fortune 500, all who appeared in the Fortune 500 over the years. And he wanted to ask the question of what makes a company go from being an okay or a good company to suddenly being a great company that, has sustainable growth or has lasting impact or becomes one of these kind of pillars of the business communities. And he wanted to kind of figure out what it is was causing these companies to make that jump. And what he wanted to do initially was not study the leaders, because he wanted it to be not about the leaders. His intent was, this will not be about the leaders. It will be about the situation. It'll be about the times. It'll be about other factors not involved in the leader. He wanted to get away from the idea of the leader being the pivotal person in this process. And unfortunately, he couldn't get away from that. The data seemed to have driven that out, that no matter what the company did, no matter what the company produced, that all these good to great companies had a certain type of leader. There was something that was characteristic about these guys that were consistent in all these good to great companies. Now, of the 1,400 companies he studied, he only found 11 that made the good to great jump. Okay, and of these 11 companies, he found this consistent trait in the leaders. It was this that he called the level 5 leadership. And I know Tom mentioned that level 5 leadership, but this was not an ideology that he was looking for in the first place. This came out of the data. Okay, so this was not something he was looking for and he found, something he was trying to avoid, but the data kept on pointing him towards this. I did years and years of research on this. The data always pointed back to the leader and to these certain traits. So I'm going to show you another slide here right now, and this is the pyramid of leadership that he kind of created in his book. And what you'll see is this level 1 to level 5. Now, as you go up these levels, you accumulate skills. Okay, so level 1 is the basic, highly capable individual. He or she makes productive contributions through talent, knowledge, skills, and good work habits. That's a basic good leader. Now, level 2 is you have those skills, and also you have other things like he contributes individual capabilities to the achievements of group objectives and works effectively with others in group settings. So now you go from your own personal skills to interpersonal skills. You're able to work with a greater community in groups. Then you go to level 3. Level 3 has the first 2 capabilities, the first 2 levels of skills, but then adds to that, they can organize people and resources towards the effective and efficient pursuit of predetermined objectives. Now you can be able to manage yourself very well. You have good skill sets, you have good work habits, you're able to manage people very well, but now you can also accumulate all those ideas into objectives, to achieving objectives. And then level 4 leadership gets into, again, you accumulate all the 3 previous levels of skills, but you also have the ability to catalyze commitment to and vigorous pursuit of a clear and compelling vision. Now you're being a very inspirational leader. You're able to rally people towards a vision, to inspire them. Stimulating higher performance standards. People are now dedicating themselves to a goal that you're pushing. Okay, that's an inspirational leadership. But then you get to this next level, this level 5. And again, you have all those previous levels available to you. Okay, you have to have level 1 capabilities before you can be a level 5 leader. But level 5 has something really interesting in it. Level 5 leaders build enduring greatness through a paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. Now, it's paradoxical because people don't tend to think of people who are humble as being strong leaders. And this is where I want to hit today, talk about the idea of humility. So again, level 5 leadership is just humility plus the will equals level 5. And again, the idea that humility is key to creating great companies is really interesting. And this was a finding that was really shocking because, in the world we see CEOs as being these alpha male, larger than life, charismatic, almost narcissistic kind of leaders, and we rally to their confidence, we rally to their strength. And, we see humble leaders as being kind of weak and ineffective and shy and whatever. But I want you to kind of reframe your idea of humility today as we go through some of this teaching from the business world, what the business world has found out, but also what the Bible says to us. Humility and being humble is not about weakness, okay? Being humble is one of the greatest forms of strength because it's a realistic evaluation of who you are and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are and who you work for, okay? There is no need to try and one-up yourself or to promote yourself because you don't need to promote yourself because if God knows who you are, then that's enough for you. So I want, again, as we go through this, I want us to reframe the idea that humility or being humble is a weak state. This is a state of great strength, okay? A humble leader is not one who shies away from confrontation. A humble leader confronts all the time. A humble leader is able to give directives, is able to, command action. It's all about their nature. This is about the inner workings of their heart versus their behavior on the outside. You can have similar behaviors but different heart attitudes. And coming from a place of humility allows leaders to be more effective, especially in motivating employees, motivating followers, but also in creating lasting companies, organizations. So let's talk a little bit about what the humility manifests itself as in the Good to Great. So in Good to Great, Jim Collins mentioned that humble leaders tended to work for the good of the company and not for the good of themselves. Okay, and this is important. This is where it's not about you, the leader. It's about your company. It's about the followers. It's about the organization. It's about the goals. It's about the vision. It's not about look at me, look how great I am, look how awesome I am. It's not about your salary. It's not about making money off the company as much quickly as you can and then get out to the next company. It's about what can I do for the good of the company? What can I do to make this organization thrive? And that's part of what a humble leader will do. Whereas the opposite of a humble leader, someone who's looking out for themselves or is self-focused, they will look out for what's best for them. And they will not look out for what's best in the company. And again, they'll do things that may be short-term successes or maybe take short-term goals that may not look good for the company long-term. Humble leaders in the Good to Great characters, they did not talk about themselves. They talk about their team and their company. So when they're asked about, what makes your company great, they didn't say, oh, it's me, the leader, obviously. It's me because I'm an amazing guy. They talk about their teams. They talk about, well, I'm surrounded by great people. Or this is a great brand. This brand sells itself. This is I've been fortunate to take over this great company, and this company has done great things for many years. I'm just helping it go further. They talk about other things. They don't always point to themselves as being the pivotal part of the transformation. And people who are around these guys, they usually describe them as quiet, humble, modest, reserved, shy, gracious, mild-mannered, self-effacing, understated, etc. So other people describe them as these things. It's not always what you consider to be a CEO of a company. Again, this kind of alpha male attitude. Again, I'm not against alpha males. It's okay to be the boss. It's the attitude that comes with it sometimes. One of the other things that came out from Good to Great was the idea of this window mirror effect. So these humble leaders, these level 5 leaders, what they would do is when things went wrong, they would look in the mirror. Okay, that's the mirror aspect of this. So when things go wrong, they look in the mirror and point to themselves. What did I do wrong? Where was my part of this problem? So they always point to themselves when things go wrong. But when things go great, they look out the window to the factory floor. They look out the window to the office cubicles outside, and they say, look at what great teams I have. So they always pass the praise and the adulation onto their people and accept the blame for themselves. Now, this is very different to what we might see in the world today. A lot of people tend to blame everyone else and accept no blame for themselves. But great, humble leaders will tend to take on responsibility when things go wrong. The whole idea of the buck stops with me, right? And then praise all their people when things are going great. So this, again, is this idea of humility allows them to give out the praise rather than take it for themselves and to take the blame for things that go wrong. So again, the leader is responsible for a lot of things. So they give credit and take blame. And this is the opposite of what a non-humble leader would do. A non-humble leader will blame everybody else when things go wrong and take all the praise for themselves when things go right. Yes, that was a great decision I made. Yes, I did great things when this happened. Or yes, look at how smart I am for making that decision. And then they'll blame everybody else when things go wrong. But here's a paradox on this. If you're a leader and you give the praise to the people will say, no, it was really you. You did a great job. We really appreciate you and what you did. But if you blame the people, then they'll blame you. If you try and blame the people for their mistakes, they'll be like, no, it was you. So whatever you do to the people, so if you give them the praise, they'll give it back to you. If you give them the blame, they'll give it back to you. So as a leader, if you understand that process, and not to be manipulative, we don't use this for bad, but the idea is that the people will give you back what you give them. Again, if you give the people the praise, they'll give you the praise. If you give them the blame, they'll give you the blame. And so, again, I don't know if people understand that process, but it's also true in a lot of other areas where the people will react differently to, or will react back to you how you react to them. Get to that later on. So moving across, one of the conclusions that they came up with in this book, Good to Great, was the great irony is that the animus and personal ambition that often drive people to positions of power stands at odds with the humility required for level 5 leadership. When you combine that irony with the fact that boards of directors frequently operate under the false belief that they need to hire a larger-than-life, egocentric leader to make an organization great, then we quickly see why level 5 leaders rarely appear at the top. So what they're saying again is that, the data seems to show that humble leaders, self-effacing leaders, tend to be more effective at creating growth and greatness in companies. But we're stuck in this mindset that we have to have these charismatic, larger-than-life, egocentric, strong, domineering characters to run the companies. And that's what's killing us, because those people don't tend to be able to raise up people under them. They tend to burn people out quickly. And again, we're going to look at this more so in some other research that came out more recently in 2015. So again, looking at what they talk about in the book, leaders who are humble attract quality people to work for them, and these people will go the extra mile for them. So leaders who are humble tend to attract better people because they want to work for them. Now, there's some studies that came out recently that show that most people leave their job because of their boss. They leave their job because they're unhappy with how their boss treats them or how they're treated in their workplace. And when you have a good leader, you will follow that person to the end of the world. You will sacrifice because they are also in the same place you are, sacrificing and trying to work towards a greater good. And people tend to rally to that. So if you're a humble leader, you will attract better people and they'll stay with you and they'll work harder. So being humble is a great thing. Being a humble leader is a great thing. Humble leaders are those with an accurate perception of their strengths and weaknesses and know the needs of others. Now, again, being humble is not being weak. It's not, oh, I'm so pathetic, I'm so terrible, I'm the worst leader ever. That's not humility. That is garbage. Humble leaders understand their strengths. They know they have the authority to make change. They know their leadership position. And they're not afraid to use it, okay? They have authority in their position. But they also know their weaknesses. When you know your weaknesses, you're able to make allowances for them by hiring people who can make those weaknesses strengths, by hiring around your weaknesses. So you bring people in who, for example, myself, I'm not the most pastoral person on the planet. I know some of the students out there will be like, no, you're very pastoral. But to make up for that lack, and I understand that lack in my life, I'm not the most, sit down, warm and huggy kind of guy, but I hire people who are around me. So our students have someone they can go to who can sit down and talk with them, sit down and give them the time they need to process some stuff they go through. Because having students on campus, they're always going through something. There's always some issues that come up. And so, I'm not the one they were going to go to necessarily for a lot of emotional support, you might say. But I understand that, therefore I make allowances for it by bringing people in who are like that and having that access for those students. And again, I was looking at humility in business. This is from the business world. Humility is in leadership, this is what some of the studies have borne out, is associated with minimizing status differences. So it's not about the C-suite versus everyone else. It's not about us and them. We're all in this together. And again, this book goes into a lot more details than I'm sharing with you now, a lot more anecdotes, a lot more stories about different leaders and how they manage. It's a great book. I recommend everyone to read it. Jim Collins, Good to Great. Go out and get that one, especially now we've got plenty of time to read. Humble leaders listen to subordinates. And this is key because so often in the world we have people who are, workers who are on the front lines of the business who are not being heard from the leaders at the top levels. And a lot of times the people in the lower levels of the hierarchy tend to understand what's going on better on the front lines than people in the top levels. A really good example of this is hospitals have gone through a bit of a shift recently, in recent times, where they started being run by MBAs, people with accounting degrees, people who are economists. And when you have a hospital run by someone who has no idea of what medicine does or how to treat patients or what the requirements are on the ground floor, when you have doctors dealing with patients and nurses dealing with patients and all the struggles of that, is you have this kind of like a disassociation of understanding where these MBAs looking at things from the purely money side of things, where the doctors and the patients looking at trying to deal with things that are purely medical side of things. And you have this shift, or there's not this shift, you have this conflict. And again, you're seeing that right now in the world. As this coronavirus is, we're trying to deal with this coronavirus as a world. This is something we've not really had to deal with recently at this level. A lot of fears came out about the coronavirus as a new virus. We don't know what it's going to do. We don't know how bad it's going to be. And the medical world kind of took the lead initially and said, look, the best way to do this is to manage this, is to shut down everything. And, people listen to the medical guys, listen to the scientists, and that was a good way to do it, to slow down this virus, to make sure, we understand it before we we don't want to get into this thing without doing anything and suddenly realize it's really dangerous, okay? But now we're starting to see this conflict between the medical scientific world and the economists. And this is okay. It's not like a bad it's us or them. It's both. How do we manage this tension between, yes, we want to keep everybody safe, but yet we don't want to destroy the economy in the countries we live in because of this thing. So how do we balance those two things? And I think right now we have, really no easy way out of this. There's really no easy way to manage this, because if you open up the country and the economy starts to go again, but the virus spreads up again or flares up again and starts killing more people, then what's the trade-off? What do we allow? What's kind of like the tension there? So again, we're seeing this kind of like, how do we balance these things? And one of the things that a good leader does, he listens to all these sides and solicits input. They want input. One of the things that's, really challenging to me is to ask for input from my employees about my life, how I'm doing. Haven't done it recently, mind you, but in the past I've done that, and it's always eye-opening when you give people kind of carte blanche permission to just talk to you about you and to share what they think about you and how your leadership style is, how it affects them. It can be very humbling, but it's always good to get that input so they can be helpful, so you can change, you can shift. We all have blind spots. All leaders have blind spots. And if we're good leaders, we recognize that we have things we can't see. And so the only way to find out what those things are is to ask people for input. Another good thing about leaders or humble leaders is they admit mistakes. They're willing to say, I messed that up. And this is really key. If you study the idea of crisis communication is how do leaders communicate during crises? And how do they communicate during problems in their company? So crises can be, a pandemic. A crisis can be a scandal in your company. A crisis can be, you mess up a product, like Samsung's phones are blowing up all over the place. These are all considered crises, but how does the leader respond to that can really impact how the world views them. And what they've found in this is the sooner a leader apologizes and admits mistakes, the sooner the people will forgive them and move on. But the longer they fight that process, the longer it sticks in their mind that the person is guilty and there's a problem. And so, again, it's like a paradox where the quicker you admit you made a mistake, the quicker people forgive you and move on. And again, people are so reluctant to say, I'm sorry, I'm screwed up, I messed up. And this is one of the things that differentiate between a humble leader and a not so humble leader is their ability to say, I was wrong, and I apologize for my being wrong. We do a class on confrontation here at Morningstar University, and we talk about confronting leaders, talk about confronting people in power above us, and how do we do that, and what's the best way to do that. And every time I do that class, I teach on confrontation, inevitably some student will come up to me and start telling me about, confronting me about some issues that I might have, or confronting me about when I hurt them, what I said bothered them, or whatever it is. And I've got to learn just to listen and apologize for what I did, because it's usually real. I mean, no leader is perfect. I understand that. I say things that may be flippant to me but may hurt other people. We make jokes or whatever it is, or our behaviors can be abrupt or whatever, and we can offend people. And it's okay to apologize for that stuff. But usually when you do that, the students become very, they let go of a lot of things. They don't carry it for a long time. We want to see our people freed from those kind of offenses. Now, again, as a leader, you deal with a lot of crazy stuff. And sometimes you have to confront back, or you have to point back at them and say, look, this really wasn't my deal, this is your deal. But again, in love. Another thing about humble leaders in the business world, if you can show this slide again, just to kind of this is kind of a summary of what a humble leader might look like in the business world. So again, minimizing status differences, listening to subordinates, soliciting input, admitting mistakes, and being willing to change course when a plan seems not to work. Changing course is basically akin to admitting you made a mistake. So if you say we're going to do this, and then as a leader you realize that's not a good idea anymore, or things have shifted, or I didn't really understand that process very well, we're going to change direction again, then that's kind of like saying I messed up, I made a mistake, we're going to change directions. Now a humble leader will do that for the good of the company. A person who's more of a narcissist kind of leader won't want to do that because he won't want to show weakness. He won't want to show that he made a mistake. He will keep on going down a wrong path for his own pride to avoid that. So these are some of the ideas that came out of this book. And again, this wasn't the only research published in the last decade regarding humility and leadership in business. I want to talk about a research paper that was put out by these three people. You see it on your screen. Waldman and Peterson, Journal of Management 2015. And the title was, Do Humble CEOs Matter? And this was a research paper. They did studies on different companies. And they wanted to see does a humble leader, a humble CEO, make a difference to the company in a positive way? So they basically asked the question, when a humble CEO leads a firm, its top management team is more likely to collaborate, share information, jointly make decisions, and possess a shared vision. This is what they kind of found out through this study was when you have a humble leader, the top management team is more likely to collaborate. They're more likely to work together. When you have more of a narcissistic leader or someone who's more controlling and domineering, the teams tend to be separated. They tend to separate themselves in a survival mentality. It's us against each other fighting for the attention of the top guy. But a humble leader will tend to bring people together and allow them to collaborate, share information, jointly make decisions, and possess a shared vision. And when you have your top leadership team operating like that, you'll be a lot more effective. If your top leadership team is fighting for survival amongst themselves, then that will never produce good results. They'll always inhibit the growth of the company. They also found that firms with CEOs that were humble tended to have lower pay disparity between the CEO and the top management teams. And the CEO's humility is relevant to performance because of its orientation towards self-improvement, learning from information and feedback, and avoidance of overconfidence. So what they found was these traits, this idea of the leaders being open to self-improvement. This is what we call teachable. These leaders were teachable. They were able to take new information and reframe situations based on new information. They weren't stuck in, I know what's best, I know what's going on, I don't need anyone else to tell me what's happening, I know everything. They were able to say, well, I don't know everything. Let me hear from this person, let me hear from this person. And I think, as much as there's a lot of criticism about what Trump's going on right now, Trump is trying to listen to all these very different opinions about what's going on in the world today in this coronavirus, and he's trying to manage them together to try and make this thing work. And again, they learn from information and feedback. They want feedback. They want people to share with them what's going on, and they avoid overconfidence, the idea that, don't worry, I've got this, I know what's happening. They avoid that, and so they're able to listen. In this study, they did bear out 3 commonly recognized and interrelated themes that are considered essential for defining humility in an organizational context. One of the things they didn't do in this study, they didn't use self-reporting. So they didn't go to a CEO and say, how humble are you on a scale from 1 to 10? Now, why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't they use self-reporting as a measure of humility in leadership? Well, part of that is that the more humble you are, you tend to rate yourself a bit lower on that scale. The less humble you are, you tend to rate yourself a lot higher on that scale. So that scale wasn't really a great measure for them. So anyway, I want to kind of move through this a little bit quickly, but the 3 traits they looked at in leadership, try to measure in this study was the CEO's willingness to obtain accurate self-knowledge. Now, humble individuals are aware of human limitations and accept that they have both strengths and weaknesses. Remember, a humble leader doesn't diminish his strengths. He knows what his strengths are, but he also knows what his weaknesses are. If you do a lot of personality studies, you'll always see that every personality has these great things and then these lacks. But putting all the personalities together, you have this great whole. Now, if you look at, the fivefold ministries, everyone in the fivefold ministries has a huge strength, but also has a bit of a weakness. For example, you might say that I won't get into this, might offend people, but anyway, like the evangelist might be really hard about go out there and get people saved. Where the pastor is more about just hang out here and let's all get together and we'll talk and we'll share and we'll whatever. And the evangelist, no, get out there and get saved. But a lot of times those two can conflict in churches because they don't understand the role of each other. The evangelist may not be the most huggy kind of lovey kind of person like a pastor might be, very relational, but they want to get people saved. They're very dogmatic about getting out there and telling people about the gospel. But their role, matched with the pastor's role, makes a good complete whole because they bring people in who are broken to a pastor who wants to connect with them and share with them and help them and heal them. Okay, so it's not one or the other, it's both together. When you add in the prophetic, the teachers, and the apostles into that mix, you have a very complete whole if we work together as a team. If we start to fight each other about our personal opinion, what's the most important thing in ministry, then we tend to neglect each other's part of this. And so even in church ministry, a humble leader will recognize what his calling is and bring other parts of the people from other parts of the other callings into his team. A really strong church team would have all fivefold ministries operating together in unity. They're not unified because they're the same. They're unified because they understand their common purpose. And so, one of these things that this study showed is that humble leaders tend to acknowledge their strengths and their weaknesses. And when they understand their weaknesses, they can make allowances for that. So such self-acceptance allows them to escape egoism, puts their accomplishments and abilities in perspective, and willingly acknowledges mistakes and limitations. So they're allowed to just see themselves in a right way, I guess you could say. Such inclinations are often grounded in acceptance of something greater than the self. And so again, there is a spirituality aspect to humility. because you tend to see yourself in light of a bigger picture, a bigger universe, a bigger creator. Okay, if we really understood God, we would not be narcissistic. We would not be egotistical. We would not be like, look at me, how awesome I am, because you're standing in front of an awesome God. And I'll talk about this later on when we get to the biblical basis of humility or biblical understanding of humility. But, God is opposed to the proud. And this is one key that we have to understand. But he gives grace to the humble. And so even if you're a business leader and you're operating in humility, then there is grace afforded to you. All right, so let's go to number 2. The second part of what they studied out in this research was the tendency to keep an open mind and continuously learn and improve. And again, this is an aspect of humility that's really important, and that's teachability. Can we be taught? Are we stuck in an old paradigm or our old mindsets, kind of like the old wineskin kind of deal? Or are we flexible enough to absorb new ideas, to move with the times? We live in a very disruptive time. Things are changing all the time. Technology is making things so much more different than they were 10, 15 years ago. I mean, when I was in high school, I learned how to type on a typewriter. That's crazy to me. And I tell my students, and like, some have never even seen a typewriter before, an actual typewriter. So we live in a very quickly changing world, and we have to be open-minded and continuously learning and improving to keep up with this. I mean, how many companies have we seen in the last couple of decades that just fell to the wayside because they're unable to see what was happening in the world, unable to move with the times? I mean, we live in a time right now where the greatest companies for lodging don't own a single house or a single hotel. I mean, Airbnb owns no property, but they're one of the biggest lodging companies in the world. I mean, Uber is one of the biggest taxi services in the world, or it was for a while, but doesn't own a single car. I mean, this is a different world we live in, and as leaders, we need to be willing to move with the times, to flow with the times, and to not be left behind. So with the awareness of the limitations and weaknesses, humble individuals are eager to improve themselves. Self-improvement is a lifelong journey. The older I get, the more I realize I need to learn more stuff. I try and study leadership every month. I try and read new books on leadership, to study the latest research on leadership. I want to continually get better at who I am as a person. There's always ways I can improve. I can improve as a husband. I can improve as a father. I can improve as a leader. I can improve as a director of a university. There are constant ways for me to improve. And right now I'm doing new course. I'm actually learning new things. I'm doing online courses to continually help myself grow. And again, the idea of a lifelong learner is key to leadership. They are open to new information, ideas and paradigms, and they're willing to take contradictory advice and even criticism. One of the hallmarks of a humble leader is the ability to hear criticism. I know in some cultures, this is a requirement of leadership, is to sit down with your people and let them criticize you and to listen and to learn from that. I think very, very few people I've met, very few leaders I meet, sit down and say, hey, tell me, give me a realistic assessment of my leadership style. Tell me where my weaknesses are. Tell me where my strengths are. And I think as leaders, we need to do that more often, because we need to see just how much we impact our people. And again, it's not about, absorbing all these criticisms. Sometimes the people who are saying these things don't really understand situations. They're not really sophisticated enough to really define you as a leader. But it's good to kind of get an understanding of who you are and where your blind spots are. And the third area they studied in this study was the appreciation of the strength and contributions of others. Now, again, in Good to Great, what they found was a lot of the writings from humble leaders, they use a lot of the terms we. We did this. We did that. We achieved these things. Me and my team achieved this. My leadership team did this for the company. There's a lot of we pronouns. When it came to the less humble leaders in this study, it was a lot of I. I did this. I did that. I made those decisions. But rarely in a company is anything a solo effort. There's so much more information that's spread throughout the company from other people doing the research, other people contributing information that flows to the top, that is very rarely an I situation. And so these humble leaders that they were studying in this report were very aware of the contribution of others they're very aware this is a team effort. There's a team surrounding me that allows me to do my job effectively. There's a team around me that gives me the right information at the right time. So there's an awareness of their own weaknesses, again, and limitations. This allows humble leaders, humble individuals to appraise others generously and appreciate others' positive worth. Again, as a humble leader, we tend to be able to give praise where praise is due. We're able to look out the window and say, what a great job you guys did as a team. You guys are amazing. I thank you for all your hard work. We achieved great things this quarter, or, we've finished this project, or we achieved these objectives, and you guys all did this. You're all part of this process, and I really thank you for all you contributed to this company. Humble leaders can do that. Humble leaders can give praise. People who are not like that have a hard time giving praise because they want the glory, they want the attention. They're not able to give the attention to other people. So this is what kind of bore out in that study. Again, the study was from the Journal of Management, 2015, if you want to read it. It's a very interesting study. It's a lot more to it than what I just shared right then, but it's a very fascinating study. You can get it online under Do Humble CEOs Matter? So again, the idea that Jim Collins found this in his studies, more recent studies have found this, and even more recently, the governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, he suggested there are 4 major or essential traits for leaders in this disruptive age. And he defined those 4 as simply ambition, clarity, purpose, and humility. Okay, this is the head of the Bank of England, and his 4 essential traits for leadership in this world are ambition, clarity, purpose, and humility. Humility keeps coming up in a lot of these studies as one of the most important traits of effective leadership. So we're going to have a little break now. I know some of you guys don't like having too many breaks, but in class time, we tend to have a 10-minute break every hour, give people a chance to go to the bathroom, to absorb all the information we just presented. We're going to have a quick break now for 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about humility and what the Bible says about humility. Then we're going to talk about what is humility and what isn't humility, and then how do we get humble? How do we become more humble? How do we stay humble? Especially when we're rising to the top of companies or rising to the top of organizations, how do we maintain our humility in those times? So stick with us. I'll see you back here at 10 o'clock, and we'll go into humility and what the Bible says about it. Thank you.
Stir the stagnant waters of my soul. Merge me with your river, which brings life. I don't have all the right words to say that will provoke you to want me anymore.
Everything worships, everything made, and nothing escapes your heart. Majesty comes from daughters and sons who hold up your name to declare you their God. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. You don't begin, you will not end. You own eternities. Your glory falls when you come near. The sound of heaven, your children release. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, Father, you are the most incredible being in the whole universe, Lord. There's no one that compares with you, God. We lift up our voices to bless you tonight, God. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. 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 Bless the Lord, oh my bless your holiness. Father. Oh, it never finishes, God. Your praises never end. Who is like unto you, Lord? Who can be compared? Oh, you're so wonderful. Oh, you're so wonderful.
Okay, welcome back. We're in the middle of a discussion on leadership and humility. I just spent the last 50 minutes talking about the business world, what the business world is researching. Now, again, why I'm interested in what the business world is researching out is because they're so invested financially in hiring the right people and understanding what makes leadership effective. And so if they come up with a conclusion, then we should really pay attention to that, because they're looking at the difference between, a company succeeding or failing, $100 million profit versus no profit, or losses. So they really are invested in this research. They really want to know how important certain character traits are for leaders, and then they want to hire accordingly. Now, unfortunately, most people don't hire accordingly to those ideas, but the research has definitely been pointing out for a long time the idea that humility is an important trait. Now, I've only mentioned a couple of studies. There are more studies out there. There are articles, in most of the Forbes magazines and Inc. Magazines, whatever magazines you're really interested in, whatever journals you read. They're always going to find something about humility as an important aspect of good leadership in business. And again, we're really tackling the concept that humility is weakness. We've got to get past the idea that a humble person is someone who's just like, I'm okay, you're okay, whatever. That's not humility. That's a false humility at best. True humility is not a lack of confidence. True humility is absolute confidence. It's absolute confidence in knowing who we are and who we're called to be and who God is and who God has called us to be. And when you operate in that realm, when you're operating in that perspective, then you are operating from a strong foundation and you're moving forward with strength. So please, again, we've got to get this paradigm out of our head that humility is about weakness. Humility is a strength. It is a very important strength, like meekness. People say, the Bible says, the meek will inherit the earth. Well, people think, if you're meek, then you must be, quiet and mild and shy or whatever it is. But there's a strength in meekness. It's a refined or how you define meekness again? Just went out my mind. This kind of like controlled strength. And that's humility really is. Humility is just controlled strength. It's just an ability to sit back and just understand who you are. Be completely confident in what God's called you to do. And confident in God who called you to be. And to operate from that strong foundation of confidence in God, especially in the Christian world. Obviously not all CEOs are Christians, and their understanding of humility might be a little different in that regard, but there is a strong connection to humility and understanding things are greater than us. There are things that are bigger than us. But anyway, we're going to take a shift now. We're going to look at the scriptures. Now, I don't have enough time this year to talk about all the scriptures on humility in the Bible. So I'm going to cherry pick some of them, kind of go through and look at some of the verses. There's a lot more verses. There's a lot of verses on humility in the Bible. And I've just chosen maybe 10, 15 of them just to look at more in depth. But the Bible has a lot to say about humility and about what it means to God and what it means to us. So let's delve into this a little bit. So we'll start with Proverbs. Obviously, Proverbs is a good place to start. The book of wisdom. So Proverbs 11:2, it says, when pride comes, then comes shame. But with the humble is wisdom. So humility brings wisdom, and that's important, okay? Proverbs 22:4, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Now you might start to think, well, humble leaders take companies from good to great. Going from that place of good to great is riches, honor, and life, right? We want that in our own lives. We want to have our own lives go from good to great. We want to see those things in our lives that are holding us back be reduced and step forward into things that God has for us. And so humility and the fear of the Lord are connected in this process. But they bring forth riches, honor, and life. Riches aren't always financial riches of other natures, like family. Psalm 25:9, the humble he guides in justice, and the humble he teaches his ways. We want to be guided in justice, and we want to be taught his ways, right? As Christians, we want to be taught God's ways, and so the best way to do that is to be humble. Because again, if you're not humble, you're proud, you are unteachable. And even God can't teach you his ways if you are proud. So again, there's a great blessing in that. Moving forward to the New Testament, Ephesians 4:2, with all humility and gentleness, be patient, bearing with one another in love. So again, this is a call to us as Christians to operate in humility towards one another, to bear each other in love, to be patient, because the product of humility is patience. Is one of the products of humility is patience. We're not angry at people all the time. We're not frustrated. They're not changing fast enough for us or whatever. We're willing to accept that we know our weaknesses, therefore we are humble. Part of the way that we can be humbled is through our own weakness, through our own mistakes, through our own sin. That can humble us if put in right perspective. And when we have that humility in our lives, we are more gracious to other people. We're more forgiving of other people. James 4:6, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Now, this is a very interesting scripture, and I looked into this a little bit. The term opposes here is actually not just like God's annoyed at the proud, or God's kind of like, doesn't like the proud because they kind of bother him a little bit, or you shouldn't be proud. What it's really saying is God, if you look at the translation of the word oppose in the scripture, the Greek here, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Greek. Well, I'll try. Antitasio, whatever it is. Anyway, that's the Greek word here. What it's really saying is God dresses himself in battle array and goes to war against the proud. Let that thing sink in for a little bit. God dresses himself in battle array and goes to war against the proud. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want my God dressing himself in battle armor to come after me. Okay? That is a seriousness of which God is coming against us. When he says God opposes the proud, God is actually dressing himself in battle gear and coming to wage war against the proud. I do not want to be proud in that setting. There's a lot of things you can fear in this world, but when God dresses himself in battle gear to come and oppose you, then that's where fear should really dwell. So think about that. Think about, just how opposed he is to the proud when he's willing to go to war against them. Okay, James 4:10, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. There's a whole culture right now in social media of this self-promotion. And there's this whole culture and a whole business around the idea of how do you promote yourself into more likes or more followers, or how do you promote yourself into becoming an influencer, or how do you promote yourself into this or that. And so we live in a culture of self-promotion. But the humble understand that it is God who will lift us up, God who will promote us. Joseph, when he was in jail, he really couldn't do much about his situation. But it was God who really promoted him out of the jail, and when God was ready for him to come out of jail. We're going to see another scripture later on that says he'll lift you up in your due time. And this is key, because what we try and do in the flesh ourselves through self-promotion, when we get to that place of authority, or get to that place of promotion, we have to maintain that in the flesh. We have to continue to strive in that position. But when God promotes us into a position of leadership through our patience and through us just waiting on the Lord to promote us and lift us at the right time, then what he does in the Spirit, he will maintain in the Spirit. He'll give us the grace to operate that level. He'll give us the grace to maintain that position, okay? And I don't know about you, but I definitely, if you're in a position of leadership, you need a lot of grace. You need a lot of God's strength and wisdom to maintain you in that position. And so, in my personal life, I have never sought promotion. I've always waited and just said, God will promote me into the position when he's ready. God told me 10 years, probably longer than that I'll be taking over MSU one day, but I never once told anybody that, nor did I ever strive to take over the university, because I just waited for his timing. And when his timing was right, I was able to step into this position. And again, that's where we want to be, because when he promotes into a position, he will give us the strength, the grace to maintain us in that position. But again, self-promotion, doing things in the flesh, putting yourself in positions above your time or beyond your capabilities, beyond your character. Because again, the time that God is taking to allow you to develop before he promotes you is what's going to develop your character, going to give you the strength, the wisdom to be able to sustain yourself in that position. But if we promote ourselves too quickly, we'll avoid that character development, that process of growth, that will help us when we get to those higher positions. So again, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. Let God be the one who promotes us in these times. Mark 9:35, if any man desires to be first, the same shall be last of all and servant of all. There's a lot of talk about servant leadership. There has been a lot of talk about servant leadership in the past. We don't hear a lot about it in today's world. Because again, I think it's one of these things that is misconstrued or misunderstood. A servant leader is not someone who, I don't know how to, they're not someone who basically does the job for their people. They don't serve them by, they don't get everyone coffee or run around and do all their work for them or clean up their desks for them or stuff like that. That's not what a servant leader is. A servant leader is someone who is serving the good of the company and the people. Now, sometimes that means you have to make hard decisions. Sometimes it means you've got to fire people. Sometimes it means they've got to do other things that may not look like it's really beneficial, but they're willing to take the hard road because that will lead to greater fruit or greater development, and see the people develop and the company grow rather than short-term gains for themselves or make themselves look good. But anyway, that's a whole other story, a whole other class on teaching on servant leadership. But again, don't misconstrue that idea that a servant leader is someone who just, does everyone's job for them or is, again, a weak person. There's a lot of strength in serving the greater good and serving the company versus serving yourself. Okay, so a servant leader is one who serves the people in the company or the organization versus themselves. Philippians 2:3-11, this is a long scripture. I always laugh at these PowerPoints I put up sometimes because my wife teaches communications. She teaches a whole course on how to do PowerPoints properly, and she would shudder at the sight of this PowerPoint being way too many words on one page and the font being way too small for people to read. But it is what it is. It's a long scripture, but I want to read it out because it's important. Philippians 2:3-11, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Okay, do nothing out of desire to promote yourself. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. In your relationship with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. What it's saying is, we have an example of humility through Jesus. Jesus' whole life was a study in humility. Not, his nature as God, not be something he attained to, but willing to let go of that nature, being in heaven and dwelling with God the Father, coming to earth and be willing to become a man and die a horrific death just to help us. But through that, was able to be exalted above all other names. And so the idea of that humility, when we humble ourselves, God will exalt us. That is the example Jesus Christ lived. He was humbled and God was able to exalt him. And again, the idea at the very start of this is, in humility, value others' interests above our own. Now, again, in leadership, this is a really challenging thing to do because how as leaders do we value our people's interests beyond our own interests? How do we look at them and say, how can I serve them the best? How can I help them get to where God's taking them? How do I look at my people who are following me or my top management team and how do I develop them? How do I see that their lives are fulfilled? How do I see that their lives become all they're called to be? Because sometimes that means they're going to take my job, which is awesome. I'm always looking for someone to take my job because there's always other jobs to do. There's never an ending work out there. So I'm always excited when someone comes along who I can train up to take my job. That's a great thing. So how do we look for those things? How do we look for people, or look at people around us as, how do I serve you and your interests beyond myself and my interest? And again, this is a separation between a good leader and a bad leader. And, you know, we've all had experiences with bad leaders in churches, especially in churches. There's probably not many people out there who could say they've had incredible, humble leaders all their lives in churches. And part of that was some church denominations promoted the idea of this lone leader at the top who's infallible. And, you know, I know my dad was a pastor for many years, and some people in his organization taught him that you don't share weaknesses with people. You don't share concerns you have in life, or you don't become more realistic or transparent with people, because they got to see you as being infallible and Christ-like so they can strive to be like you. And that's a very dangerous way to operate as a leader. And I think we've all recognized that that's problematic. But again, we've all seen these leaders in churches, in ministries who have this authority and power that's either over time it's gotten to them and made them a lot worse, or because of some brokenness in their past, or they start off that way. They started off having all these issues. And I dare to say that most people who've been burnt by churches or burnt by church leadership have been burnt by leaders who are proud and not humble. I don't think very few humble leaders really burn people out. So anyway, moving along, 1 Peter 5:5-6, likewise, you younger people, this is important, submit yourselves to your elders. That's me, students, I'm your elder. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another. So he starts off by saying, young, be submissive to the elders, but he says, but everyone be submissive to each other. And be clothed with humility. Be dressed in the garments of humility, okay? For God resists the proud. Again, he goes to war against the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. He gives his grace, his strength, his favor, all the things that we want in life, wisdom, teachings, he gives to the humble. Therefore, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Now, this is, again, mentioned this before, the key is that it's in due time. God, just because you act humble for a week doesn't mean God's going to exalt you straight away. There's a process God is putting us all through as leaders. Okay, if you're not leading right now, you're in a process of becoming a leader. That's what I always talk to our students about. You're either leading or you're in the process of becoming a leader. And even when you're leading, you're still in the process of developing to become a better leader. But if you're not leading right now, you're in the process of becoming a leader, and God has a timeline set for you. There is an established time that he will exalt you. If you continue to operate in that, and again, this is a patience part of this. We have to have patience to be willing to wait out that time, to acknowledge that we're being trained, that we're learning to develop our character better, learning to become better people, learning to take off our rough edges, whatever it is that God's dealing with us in that time. He is processing us, he is developing us, and when he is ready, and when he sees that we are ready, he will exalt us in that time. Not sooner, not later, but in his time. And again, self-promotion and the idea, the temptation of Christ was to bypass the cross, right? When he's facing the devil after the 40 days of fasting, the devil's like, do this for me and you can have all this stuff right now. And God's like, no, that's not my journey. He had to go through the process to the cross, and he'll gain all those things. And sometimes this self-promotion pushes us to a place of leadership or authority that we're not ready for. And again, there's the idea that if we wait for God to promote us and let God do those things behind the scenes to make those promotions happen, then we'll know, first of all, we're ready. We'll know that God has ordained it, and that we'll know that God's going to have our back and give us the grace to operate in that position. If we do it in our own strength, again, what we do in our own strength, we have to maintain in our own strength. And leadership is a difficult path to walk, and it's even more difficult if God is not with us in that process. So again, we humble ourselves that we may be exalted in our due time when we're ready. All right, Matthew 18:4, whoever will humble himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom. This is what Jesus Christ said to the disciples. Whoever will humble himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 23:11-12. But he who is greatest among you will be your servant, and whoever will exalt himself will be humbled, and whoever will humble himself will be exalted. Now, this is kind of back to that idea that what we do, God will do the opposite of. If we exalt ourselves, God will humble us. If we humble ourselves, God will exalt us. Kind of the idea of you can either fall on the rock or the rock can fall on you. And I can highly recommend that you fall on the rock, because when the rock falls on you, it's a lot more devastating being in that process. So again, we're allowing God to operate in these situations. And then, of course, in John 13, 14 to 15, we see Jesus is shattering all the conventional views of leadership by demonstrating the kind of humility that he wants his leaders to have by washing the feet of the disciples. Now, this is a job that the servant does in the houses. When you come into a house, if you ever walked around Israel with flip-flops on, you'll know how quickly your feet get dirty. When you walk into houses, they always used to wash the feet all the time to avoid all that stuff getting into the house. This is a job of the servant of the house. This was a lowly job. And Jesus himself stooped down and washed all the disciples' feet. If you want to know how much of an affront this was to them, remember Peter was, he's like, no, you can't do this. I can't allow you to do this. I can't allow my master to wash my feet. And Jesus was like, well, if you can't do this, you can't be part of what I'm doing. And so he did this as an example of how we should treat each other, to wash each other's feet. Now, I've washed people's feet before. It's challenging. It's very humbling to wash someone's feet. It's really, really challenging. But I don't think this is something we'll do generally in today's world. I think there's an example of how we should treat each other with respect and honor, and putting ourselves in a lowly position to exalt others. And when Jesus Christ said, he said, if I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. So again, Jesus Christ is he's giving us an example of how we should be as leaders. He's basically saying, I'm your Lord and your Master, and I'm willing to bend down in front of you and wash your feet, take the position of a servant, okay, the servant of the household, and wash your feet. Then you do the same for others. Lift each other up, take care of each other, honor each other, love each other. Do not bicker and fight about who's most important or who's going to be next in charge, or don't try and pull each other down because you're feeling insecure, whatever it is. It's washing each other's feet. And again, if you have a real problem with somebody, if you're really fighting with your wife or your spouse or whatever, try washing their feet. See how that works out for you. It's very humbling. All right. So that's kind of like the scriptural kind of survey of humility. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. We could spend hours and hours teaching about just humility and understanding humility in the Bible. But I want to talk a little about, we talk about, okay, we're going to be humble. We need to operate in humility. But, well, what is humility? Okay, how do we define humility? How do we become humble? How do we stay humble? Obviously, there's questions that arise from this kind of teaching. And let's go to what is humility. Now the Greek, this is a Latin. The real root of humility is low, grounded. In the New Testament, in the Greek, there's a word used for humility that kind of connects with the idea of, it's two kind of root words, understanding and lowliness. So it's an understanding of our position, our low position, in respect to God and other people. So it really just means to be low. It's a temperance. It's a character trait, or a kind of a appearance of who we are that is neither prideful or indulging in self-deprecation. So there is a thing called false humility, and that's very dangerous. I'll talk about it a bit in a second, but it's not prideful. It's not, look at me, look how important I am, I'm better than everybody else. It's an understanding of who we are. It's an outward expression of an appropriate self-regard. How do we see ourselves? When Jesus was asked what was the greatest commandment, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like this, to love your neighbor as yourself. And there's a flow there of loving the Lord your God and with all your heart, soul, and mind is coming into a relationship with God in the fullness of who we are. And then through that, understanding how much God loves us and who we are in God. And then through that understanding of ourselves, we can love our neighbors in a healthy way. Okay? There's a flow there. It's love the Lord your God, then learn to love yourself, and then love your neighbors as you love yourself. Now it says love your neighbors as you love yourself. You have to love yourself first. And loving yourself is not, this prideful thing. It's appreciating who God has made you, who you were called to be, the talents and giftings He put inside you, and learn to appreciate all those things in context of His kingdom, of His glory. And to be humbled in the fact that He's given you all these incredible giftings and talents to show Himself to the world, to use you to show His love to the world. And that's a humbling thing when the Creator of the universe has given you certain skills and giftings that He's going to use to reveal Himself to the world. That's how we should see ourselves. And it's not about, I'm so awesome, because no one who knows God will ever think they're awesome. There's a comparison there that once you kind of come to face with the living God, you don't think you're an incredible person. There's a kind of a perspective that's put in place, I guess you could say. Humility is the psychological opposite of narcissism. Now, there's an interesting study that came out again recently that narcissists tend to congregate at the higher echelons of leadership. And narcissism is a very, very, very dangerous thing. It is very damaging, very harmful, very destructive. And it's, in some people, some psychologists, some studies believe that it can't be shifted, it can't be changed. I don't necessarily hold that view because I think everyone is redeemable in the kingdom. But it's such a difficult thing to shift because narcissism operates in this real sense of self-righteousness. And when you're living in self-righteousness, it's such a delusion that occurs with that. It's very hard to break. But they tend to congregate at higher levels of authority, and that's dangerous. And that's where you see a lot of this destruction that occurs in leadership. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs states that in Judaism, humility is an appreciation of oneself, one's talents, skills, and virtues. When you learn to appreciate who you are. Now, they say that we all speak to ourselves all day long, but very rarely do we say nice things to ourselves. If you were to say to your friends the same thing you say to yourselves in your own head, you wouldn't have very many friends left. We speak very harshly to ourselves. And part of that is we don't recognize just how valuable we are in God's kingdom, God's economy, how many talents He's given us, the skills we have, the destiny we have been called to, the process we've been called to, the purpose we've been called to. When we understand that, we come into a place of right assessment, okay? And we start to speak more kindly to ourselves. We start to speak more highly of ourselves in our own mind. We start to push back against these negative thoughts. Humility is not to think lowly of oneself, but to appreciate the self one has received. We have been given an incredible opportunity here. We've been made for such a time as we live in, whatever time that was. But today we are living in a new time. We've been given an opportunity to live in this time. We've given access to the wisdom of the world at our fingertips, more so than any other time in history. We can travel everywhere. We have incredible opportunities. And we just have to learn to appreciate who we are and who God made us to be, and to have that strong foundation in ourselves that God has called us to a process and a purpose, and not to belittle ourselves or to think too highly of ourselves. He also speaks about recognizing the mysteries and complexities of life. One becomes humbled to the awesomeness of what one is and what one can achieve. We are wonderfully and fearfully made. And when we recognize that, we recognize this body we live in is an incredible tool that God has given us. The most impressive thing we're ever going to own is our own bodies. And to be able to use that for His purposes, to use the skills we've been given. Everyone has been created, with different sets of skills, different opportunities. We all are a manifestation of God in this world. And if we can recognize that, we can recognize that God is going to use us to manifest Himself into this world, then we can be humbled in that process, but also understand that we are incredibly made and have incredible opportunities to go forth and do great things. Rabbi Dana discusses that humility is to place others first. It's to appreciate others' worth as important. Again, when you recognize who you are, when you love the Lord your God with your whole being, body, mind, spirit, then you learn to love yourself, understand who you are in that context. You understand how God loves us and how we are loved. Then we are able to love other people. We are able to care for other people. We don't care if other people get promoted above us. That's not our journey. That's their journey, okay? You know, so many times in the school we see students who get promoted in different areas very quickly, and it causes a lot of jealousy. Jealousy is not the mindset of a humble person. Jealousy is focused on themselves. Jealousy is a self-focus. Why didn't I get that? Why shouldn't I be doing that? They should look at me. I'm better than that person. Whereas this idea that lift each other up, appreciate other people's promotions, appreciate other people's gains. What God is doing in other people's lives is their journey. They're at a different place than us. We can't, you know, there's an old saying, we can't compare our chapter 1 to other people's chapter 13s or 14s. We're in our journey, and we've got to make sure we do our journey right and not compare ourselves to other people's journeys. You know, Moses wrote in the Torah, this is always a great thing, he wrote, and Moses was exceedingly humble, more than any man on the face of the earth. How can a humble man write about himself that he's the most humble man on earth? And again, this is the idea that it's rightly assessed in situation. Moses was able to say, I'm the most humble person on earth. And again, whether you agree that was written by him or not, or added later on, it's just an interesting study that, you know, they used to give out humble badges, but you're not allowed to wear them, right? So it is possible to believe that you're humble and be humble. But again, we're not trying to compare ourselves with each other. Humility is not in the denial of your talents and gifts, but to recognize them and live up to your worth and something greater. So if you're a musician, then be a great musician. It's okay to be a great musician. It's okay to be excellent in your skills, excellent in your talents. Don't diminish those things. Don't diminish what God has put inside you, but use them for the greater good. Use them for the kingdom. Use them for what God has called you to use them for. Don't belittle them. Don't put them aside. You know, so often in life where we can get mocked, we can get hindered in believing in ourselves through family, friends, teachers. But we have to look to the scriptures, what the scriptures and what God says about us, and really use that as our basis of operation and not what other people say about us. And, you know, being the best version of ourselves. It is a service to others that is the greatest form of humility. Learning to love others, to care for others, to share with others is an important form of humility. True humility is distinctly different from false humility. Again, I'm talking about this false humility. False humility consists of putting yourself down and putting your own gifts and talents down, or your own accomplishments, for the sake of receiving praise or adulation from others. So it's this kind of idea like, oh, I'm terrible. And everyone's like, oh, no, you're awesome. Like, no, I'm terrible. No, you're awesome. People do this on Facebook all the time. I mean, Facebook is kind of like the false humility mecca of the universe, I think. Everyone's like, oh, I'm a terrible person. Everyone's like, they're just kind of fishing for compliments. They're out there fishing for compliments. This is not true humility. This is just needing validation. And humility doesn't need validation from people. Humility has the greatest validation from God. And they operate from that perspective. God has called me to do this. God has called me to be a part of what his kingdom is doing on earth. And because of that, I don't need validation from other people. I don't need validation from humans. Okay, God is my validation. It's okay to get validation from humans. It's okay to get validation from our friends and family. It's not wrong, but just that's not the basis of how we operate. Legitimate humility compromises the following behaviors and attitudes. So humility allows us to submit to authority. You know, this is a key. Submitting to God and legitimate authority is one of the keys, or the behaviors of true humility. You know, if we're full of pride, we tend to kind of fight against leadership. We fight against authority. We think we're better than authority. We think we're above authority. And that's definitely not a good place to operate in. Number 2, recognizing virtues and talents that others possess. And this is key. We have to, you know, humble people are able to look into other people's lives and see the gifts and talents that they have and not get offended by them or not get jealous of them, but able to promote them, able to say, you know what, you're way better at this than I am. You should be doing this. You know, when we talk about small team leadership, talk about small team operations, there's an aspect in it when we have to recognize the strengths and talents of everyone in our small team so that when the time comes for a certain talent to be needed, we pick the most talented person for the job, not the leader. This is one thing that the military small teams operations do, the kind of special forces. They always have these specialists in their teams. You have a guy that might be a specialist in demolition, a guy specialist in communications, and as they operate in these small teams, depending on what the situation requires, that specialist might take over the kind of leadership of the group. They might say, okay, the leader will defer to the specialist. Hey, you're an expert in demolition. Can we do this job? You're the expert in communications. Is this going to be helpful? Can we communicate with our base during this operation, or do we need to carry more stuff? They always have these specialists that they can defer to because the leader understands that I don't know everything. The fivefold ministries is fivefold for a reason. Not one person has all of it. And if we think we have all of it, and we think that we only need to be one person at the top, then I think we're deluding ourselves. We need to, the church needs pastors, the church needs evangelists, the church needs prophets, the church needs teachers, the church needs apostles. And too often the teachers are fighting with the prophets because they're like, where does it say that in the Bible? And the prophet's like, well, this is revelation from God. It's not necessarily going to be exactly in the Bible, but it's not contradicting Scripture. But we need to have good doctrine because sometimes the prophetic can get a bit weird. And if we're not careful, we can go off Scripture, we can go off doctrine, we can get caught up in this weird ethereal stuff. And again, that's kind of what God showed me about teaching good doctrine and good theology, is it keeps people from getting weird and getting off into weird tangents and believing in weird things. Especially in the New Age world, we see too many people, come into the spiritual environment, but then drift off into New Age kind of craziness because they weren't really grounded in good theology. So we need teachers to teach the word. We need teachers to teach good theology. We need these teams to operate together. So again, it's understanding that other people have gifts and talents that may surpass my own, and therefore I should defer to them when those different talents are needed. That's humility. That's humble leadership, listening to others. And then number 3, recognizing the limits of one's talents, abilities, authority. We need to understand that we don't know everything. We're not God. We're not infallible. We don't know everything. We don't have everything for everybody. We are people. We have blind spots. We have weaknesses, and we need to adjust for those things. We can try and strengthen them, but we're not going to be perfect, well-rounded human beings, all the time. So we have to recognize our limits, and that's part of being humble. All right. So I guess that's kind of like a general understanding of what humility kind of is: a rightful assessment of oneself, not a diminishing of ourselves, but an understanding of just how incredible God has created us and how many talents and giftings He put inside us, so that we understand who we are in His presence, in His kingdom, so we can move forward with strength and not, I'm not good enough for that, I'm not worthy of that. It's okay. We're all, struggling through life, but we have to understand that we want to strive to be the best versions of ourselves and the best people we can be, and we have to keep moving forward in that process. How do we stay humble? How do we get humble? How do we stay humble? Sometimes people start off in the leadership position. They're pretty humble, doing really well. But then later on in life, maybe after a few more promotions, suddenly they're at the top. Some things might creep in, some ideas might creep in, and suddenly they're operating as some sort of narcissist or, really not on pride or whatever. This happens quite a bit. I've seen this happen in churches where I come from in Australia. People start off seemingly well, but when they get to a position of real authority in the church, suddenly they're not doing very well. They start getting really self-focused, self-absorbed. And so we have to really keep these prideful ideas out of our minds. These are temptations we can face to become prideful. We have to keep ourselves in perspective. And that's usually keeping ourselves in relationship with God. Once we start to drift away from relationship with God, we can start getting into these ideas of, I'm here because I'm awesome. I'm here because I did this. I'm here because I'm an incredible person and I'm worthy of all these honors and so forth. One of the things that I was told when I was leaving Australia, I was called to come to America, and I was leaving Australia, and my church was praying for me, and this pastor in the church, this real old-time pastor, been in ministry for 400 years or something, but just a real pillar of our church community at large, written several books, And he prayed with me and he said to me, he said, Nathan, don't take any of God's glory for yourself. That's the only thing he said to me. And I think that's the danger of being proud. I think when we start operating in pride, we start taking the glory for ourselves. We start tapping into what's meant for God and taking it for ourselves. And that's a very dangerous place to operate. And that's why I think God starts to oppose us, because we start taking the focus off him and putting it onto ourselves. And that's a very, very dangerous thing to do in front of God's people. The moment we start telling people, look at me, don't look at God, then we're really, really endangering the people and ourselves. And that's why God will oppose us, because he wants people to look to him, because he has the answers, he has the healing, he has the power and the authority, not us. Our role as leaders is to point to God, not to distract people from God. And that's the difference between pride and humility. Humility will point people to God. Pride will take people away from God and put the focus on us. And that's a place I do not want to exist in. So I do not want to see God dressing up in his battle gear to come out and fight me. That's something I never want to have an experience with. Anyway, so how do we stay humble in this crazy social media, look at me driven world? A couple of things, a couple of ideas. Again, it's not complete. There's a couple of ideas here. Never stop learning. Be always open to learning. Never come to a place where you think you know everything. I thought I knew everything when I was 21, and I've gotten dumber ever since. And, now I know I don't know a lot of things. I think I know less and less every year of my life. And so it's important to keep learning, keep striving after knowledge and skills and growing, and even learning about yourself, learning about your own inconsistencies. But yeah, keep learning. Part of that would be seek regular feedback. Especially if you're a leader, then ask for feedback. I know sometimes my students will ask, how do I get better? I said, well, go to 5 people you really value and appreciate and ask them for feedback on your life. Ask them for an assessment of who you are. Ask them to show you where your strengths and weaknesses are. Let them speak into your life. Ask them for, what things we need to strengthen, what things we need to get better at. Seek out those advice. And if you're a leader, seek it out from your people. Seek it out from your people, from your peers. If you have other people in a similar business or similar church involvement, look to those people for feedback. Say, hey, I'm struggling with this stuff, or I'm dealing with this stuff. What do I do? So often church leaders fall down because they've got no one to go to. They've got no one to talk to, no one to pour out their heart to, no one to confess stuff to. So they struggle in silence for so long, and then they eventually fall into all these problems that can destroy the whole church. So we need to have this ability to seek regular feedback, to seek people who can speak into our lives. Be authentic. Own mistakes. Don't try and pretend you're this incredible, infallible leader that never makes mistakes. Be transparent. If you make a mistake, if you talk to a person harshly, or you say the wrong thing, or just apologize. It's okay to apologize. You should be apologizing regularly to people, and it just helps you humble yourself. I hate apologizing to things. It bothers me a lot, probably more than it should. But I know, even in my own marriage, that it's healthy if we are regularly apologizing to each other. Because in marriage, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to upset each other. And you have to learn to apologize. And as much as I don't like doing that, I do it as much as I can, as much as I humanly possible. Probably should do a lot more. As leaders, don't feel the need to know everything. I think sometimes as leaders, we kind of feel the pressure to know everything and have the answers for everybody. I don't feel that pressure at all in my life anymore. There are people out there who know way more than me. Even, for example, in the school, as director of a school, I don't know as much theology as Justin Perry knows. I don't have as much experience with leadership as Tom Hardiman does. I don't have the same access to revelation about the world and the current events as Rick Joyner does. It's okay. It doesn't make me feel upset. It makes me appreciate that I'm surrounded by people who do have all these gifts, and that we can utilize them in the school. We can bring them into the school and teach the students. I don't need to be the best at everything. I like the fact that people go to other people for prayer and ministry, not to me. Because they're people who are better at that stuff than I am. That's part of the nature of it. If we understand the gifts around us, we can utilize them for the greater good. And we don't have to be everything to everybody. If you try and do that, you'll end up killing yourselves trying to be that. And be a servant leader. And again, servant leaders is a whole other topic, but it's learning to serve the people and their needs, not just use the people to serve your own needs. Morningstar has a motto that we post on our walls around here. It's like, we use the ministry to build people, not the people to build ministry. And that's kind of the same idea of a servant leadership. It's we're using the ministry to build up people. We're building up our people and not using the people to build the ministry. Because the people are more important than the ministry. Back in the 60s, it was love people, use things, don't use people and love things. It's the same kind of idea. See the bigger picture. You know, putting ourselves in perspective, you know, you might seem like you're awesome. Like, I know, for example, working in the school, you know, I'm an older guy now, and I'm working with a bunch of young people who might be like wide-eyed and like, oh, wow, you know, you're so wise, or not, oh, I don't get that very often, but they're like, oh, wow, you know, you've done so many things, or that can tend to make me think like I'm so awesome and incredible because I'm dealing with a lot of people who haven't had those life experiences yet. But when I put myself in perspective of God and the kingdom of God, then I can't lose that. I can't think of myself as being incredibly awesome because, you know, God is there. You know, God is way bigger than all this, and I'm humbled in his presence. Also, if I hang around with other leaders, leaders who have been around longer than I have, I'm humbled as well. And so it's seeing the bigger picture around us, that I'm a part of a continuum, and these young people will eventually become older people who will pour into young people and be hopefully way better than I am and have way bigger impact in the world than I do. And that's part of my desire, to see every young person that comes into the school raised up to do greater things than anyone around here's ever done, to be the next generation of world changers, and to help them in that process, to serve them and give our resources and our knowledge and our wisdom to help them become those people. Serving something bigger than ourselves. Again, this is the idea of the kingdom of God. You know, so often we'll talk about kingdom-minded leaders versus their own kingdom-minded leaders. We'd rather have people who are kingdom-minded than building their own kingdoms. And this is the idea of serving something bigger than ourselves. Learning to value others is a key. You know, I spent a lot of time when I was younger praying for the real heart of God for other people, because I knew there was a struggle in my life to like people, because they drove me crazy most of the time. But I really prayed, the Lord, show me how to value others, how to love people, how to be patient with people. And God really did that. He changed my heart. He really did transform my heart. He did place part of his heart in me. It got really bad for a while when I couldn't stop crying at TV commercials and all that kind of stuff. So I had to kind of reevaluate that and kind of bring it back a little bit to more of a realistic place. But God will do those things if you pray. One very dangerous prayer that you might be really cautious about praying. You can pray to be humbled, but that can be very dangerous. It can be very, God will answer that prayer. You might be better off praying for God to show you how to become more humble, show you areas in your life where you might have some pride. But praying to be humbled is like praying for the rock to fall on you. And that will happen, and it will be humbling, and it will be great. It will have great results, but it can be a bit of a process to go through. All right, so we're getting close to the end of this deal. I'm not going to speak for 2 hours today. I'm not going to go through a third hour today. But let's just kind of recap some of this stuff. So we've talked about business leadership, the world leadership, and how humility is becoming recognized as key to great leadership in the business world. We talked about how the Bible has shown that for thousands of years, about how important humility is in gaining the favor of God and to be exalted by God and to earn all the riches and life and benefits of that grace. But let's just sum up here a little bit. For those leaders who don't have humility, I know what's going on with the screen. Okay, we're good. For those who do not have humility, leadership will always be about what they get. Okay, so fame, fortune, power, and praise. That's what leadership without humility will always seek after. They want the fame, the fortune, the power, and the praise. And this is a dangerous trap, because with leadership comes some of those things. We have to be careful that our heart is not open to the temptation of believing it's us that's getting them, or us that's causing it. For those who do have humility, leadership is always about the people, the organization, and building something larger and more lasting than themselves. i.e. the kingdom of God. Don't strive to be the best in the boat. Try to be the best for the boat. It's an interesting little saying there. So don't try to be the best in the kingdom. Try to be the best for the kingdom. We're not trying to compare ourselves to other people. It's not about me being better than the person next to me. It's about us both being the best we can be for the sake of God's kingdom. We're all ultimately trying to give Christ his prize for what he earned on the cross. And that's really our goal. Humble Christian leaders are kingdom-minded, only desiring to build God's kingdom and not their own. And this is such an important issue for leadership. We have to make sure that we're really building God's kingdom and not trying to promote our own little kingdoms. Because promoting your own kingdom will always cause you to conflict with others building their own little kingdoms. It kind of creates a competition that's not healthy. There is some healthy competition, iron sharpening iron kind of stuff, but there's unhealthiness where we start to fight against each other for the biggest piece of the pie, to be the biggest in the kingdom. It happened with the disciples. It didn't go well for them. So giving God all the glory and taking none for themselves. And this is really the part of it that's really important, that we don't take any of God's glory for ourselves. Whereas leaders, we're always pointing our people to God and not to us. Because I don't want to ever get between God's people and himself. Okay, that's the worst place for a leader to be. And especially if we're taking people away from God's care into our own care and using them to build ourselves up and to promote ourselves and to make ourselves richer or to make ourselves feel more powerful. That's a really dangerous place to operate in, especially in the kingdom. And once we find these leaders, these humble Christian leaders, kingdom-minded leaders, these are people we want to follow. These are people who will build great churches, people who will build great ministries, people who will do great things, and who will sustain. So just as I finish up here, I want to go back to the original statement I said at the start of the class. As a leader, it's not about you, but as a leader, it's all about you. So let me just kind of rephrase that a little bit. The humble leader knows that it's not about themselves and focuses on building people and effective organizations, kingdoms. They focus on building the kingdom in the Christian world. So the humble leader knows it's not about himself. So as a leader, it's not about you. As a leader, it's about the people. It's about God's kingdom. It's about the prize that Christ earned on the cross. It's about those things, not about me, about my fame, about my riches, about my whatever. But the humble leader also knows that it is their character and skills that set the standard and culture of the teams they lead. So these leaders work hard to be the best versions of themselves through constant improvement and feedback. So it's not about you, the leader, it's about the people. But it is about you, the leader, and how you lead. It's important that you take on these attributes of humility. You operate in the character of the kingdom and not the character of the world. And that is what's going to, that's your part of the play. It's not about you, the leader, but it's all about you, the leader. As the leader, you set the culture. You establish whether you're going to operate in humility or operate in pride. You establish, whether you're going to be teachable or not teachable. And those things are going to affect your organization and your people. And so it's not about you, the leader, but it's all about you, the leader. So if you have any questions about any of that stuff, if you have any comments, feel free to leave them on the Facebook feed. I'd love to get back to you on those. I will read through them and kind of respond to any comments you have. I've seen a couple already. People are asking about this PowerPoint. If you email us at msuoffice@mstarm.org, then we're happy to send this to you. Or just contact us through our website, our morningstaruniversity.com website. We're happy to send you a PowerPoint and give you any resources we have available. We're happy to do that. But yeah, I'm really enjoying these classes, talking to you guys. Hope you guys had a good class today. Hope you guys learned a lot. Don't forget that if you're interested in joining or partnering with us at Morningstar, you can join our Partners Program. It's available on our website at morningstarministries.org. You can go along and join there. We really appreciate our partners and all the resources they provide for us to help us do what we're doing, to continue doing what we're doing. Don't forget also MSTV, what you're watching through probably right now, if you're on the MSTV website. This is a free resource to our partners. So if you want to become a partner, you get this resource. You have access to a lot of conference videos, old stuff from way back in the day, some great teachings from some great men of God and women of God. Incredible resources to have, and we'll be having some online courses on there as well. So join up with MSTV as well. That's great. But other than that, I think that's it. I hope you guys are all doing well in the quarantine. Hopefully we'll figure this out as the world, and we'll come out of this stronger and better. Don't forget to learn all the things you need to learn at this time. Don't get caught up in crazy conspiracies. That's not the point of this. This is a great time to prepare, to reset, to refocus, and to get off Facebook and to see the world in new light. But anyway, hope you guys are doing well, and I'll probably touch base with you all next week. I think we have Michael Fickus teaching tomorrow. Michael Fickus is an author and a great teacher, incredible Bible teacher. And then next week we're going to have some more teaching up until Friday. And hopefully on Friday, we're looking at doing just kind of a bit of a blessing or a little bit of a wrap up from some of our leaders, just to say farewell to our students. We were meant to graduate in a couple of weeks. That's been postponed, but hopefully next week we can share a few things. We may even put a few of our students' teachings online. Might share a few of those as well. But anyway, it's been good, and have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you all soon.